Hey everyone, welcome to the national overview for Shinuyama. This video was requested and sponsored by 30 to 1, so thank you for that, buddy. Shinuyama is a pretty cool little goblin nation. It's fitting, I think, that we cover this after we'd covered Vedheim because there's a lot of similarities. This is another goblin nation that has size 1 units that are not undisciplined. They have some undisciplined size 1 units too, but that means you can do lots of fancy point buffing. And this is a nation with a lot of similar paths to Vedheim. They have death, they have water and nature, but instead of having astral and blood like Vedheim has, these guys have fire and earth instead. And in some ways, they will play very similar to Vedheim. They also have a fair amount of stealth. But in other ways, they play a lot different. And we'll certainly talk about that. It's a pretty interesting nation. The other thing that's important about Shinuyama, of course, is that they exist in Middle Age. And that is a very different era to exist in than in Late Age. In Late Age, you have more crossbows, you have heavier armor. You also have a lot more access to things like wailing winds and things like that. And there's also a lot more blood in the Late Age. In the Middle Age, you don't have blood, but neither do many other nations. You're kind of in the same boat as they are. So given that, let's dive into this. I want to start with kind of the grand strategy. Then we'll move into unit design, like some of the units. We'll go through the roster. And then we'll talk about gimmicks. And then we'll probably repeat with like how you win with the nation. That's how we'll shut this thing down. So we'll probably talk about that twice. I'll probably talk about how you win with the nation here at the beginning as well. So there's a few things about this. One is you have really cheap troops. Like, to give you an idea, these guys in a mountain province, these are your cheapest Bakemono. In a mountain province, they cost 5 gold. This is for a size 1 dude that does 15 damage. The amount of, like, murder these guys can produce, like, one tile of these, a single tile, right? You're going to have 6 of these guys for 5 gold. It's only 30 gold. That's super cheap to fill up a tile. I mean, not super cheap. It's the same price, basically, as like 3 human troops. All right, so it's kind of actually a little bit normal. However, you're packing way more murder into that square than you normally would. And, you know, it's hard to get rid of a tile of Bakemono if you're not doing area of effect damage. Like, you have to hit it 6 times, right? And each of those times, it can miss, it can check against protection and fail, a bunch of things. And meanwhile, they're blindering you. Now, these guys are undisciplined. The very cheapest Bakemono show is undisciplined. There are other kinds, like this guy, who is not undisciplined. And we'll talk about all the different varieties. But one of the things that you can do super duper well is point buff. So what does that mean? Well, it means point buffs are really early in research. You get a lot of the point buffs you're going to want by like Alt 3. I can't remember what quickness is. I think quickness might even be Alt 3 or 4. But yeah, most all the buffs you're going to want are available super duper early. And that means this nation is a very fast-paced nation. So you're not really waiting on a lot of the timings for like big magics, right? Like, you're not really waiting to get like Alt 7 or something like that. Like, you're going to be busting out with Alt 4 and 3, 4, and 5, right? Like, you're coming out swinging. Now, there's stuff we can do later, but that's the first thing to note about this nation, is this nation is ready to fight super duper early. There's another thing kind of, we're going to keep, if you haven't seen my Vedheim video, go watch it. There's another thing, I'm going to keep referencing it, right? Because one of the ways that this nation is different than Vedheim is we don't really have stealthy mages. I mean, we kind of do. This guy can be stealthy in their other form, but, and they're also not size 1 mages. So like, Vedheim has like fully committed to size 1. All right, Jotunheim has not Jotunheim. Shinuyama has not fully committed, right? So like they're not all in on the goblin stealth stuff, right? They've got 1 foot in the river. All right, so the Uba, who's really your point buffing mage, they can follow you around and point buff in, being stealthy. So they can, go around with stealthy armies. Check, they can do that. But they don't do it as well as Vedheim. Vedheim really does it significantly better because, for one thing, when you're doing your point buffs, these guys sometimes are going to buff themselves. And you're going to have more tiles with mages in it. Whereas, like, you can pack 6 Vedheim mages into 1 tile. You can't pack 6 Ubas into 1 tile. That means that 1 tile of Vedi mages, they can only absorb 1 casting of all the area of effect 1 buffs, right? But you're going to have more dilution here. Don't let that fool you to think that these guys can't still do it pretty well. And these goblins should attract the targeting aggro even over 3 tiles. I mean, a tile with 3 humans in it. So, you can still do this pretty well, just probably not quite as well as Vedheim. There's other things like Vedheim has Astral, which is going to, in some ways, make them superior for point buffing, but Earth is also really good for point buffing. So it's going to be like a thing. There's going to be certain types of things, certain types of foes that Shinyama will do better against, and there's going to be certain types of foes that Vedheim will do better against. Like, having luck in Body Ethereal is really, really good, right? And it's going to be, in some ways, like, more versatile, where, like, air elementals are coming at you. Great, we're ethereal, and we're lucky. It still takes a long time for an air elemental to kill 6 lucky ethereal goblins, right? Fire elementals are coming at you. We'll talk about fire elementals in detail later. Like, Vedheim, they can get luck on their goblins. Now, their goblins are still going to explode fighting fire elementals, sort of. But having luck does dramatically increase how long they last. Or, like, how many fire elementals they can kill. You're going to lose a lot of goblins still. So, the first thing when thinking about this nation is we've got a lot of early timings around low-level alteration research. And a lot of our really cheap, like, comouting, these units, you can also get them in the highlands and the mountains, the undisciplined ones. So you're going to literally be, like, bleeding Bakemono. You have so many of them. And they're stealthy. You can really just overrun an enemy. It's a little bit ridiculous. So, the first thing is you have very good early timings, committing mages to kind of a war where you're going to go point buff some guys and go run at the enemy and kill them. Getting in a war like that where you're planning on committing mages is a little tricky. A lot of times you don't, like, it's one of the reasons that bless builds tend to work pretty well in Dominions, is you don't really need, like, you can bring a lot of power. Okay, think about it this way. When you kill a nation, you have to kill their mage core, right? And that's hard. That gives the enemy a pretty big advantage on the defensive, is they get to use their whole mage core. You usually, I say this, like it's a rule, law of nature. It's not. But most of the time, people don't want to commit their entire mage core to even the playing field in an offensive war at the beginning of the game. Like, nobody wants to move out all their mages. Right? You could, right? But the thing is, like, even if you win, you will probably be so far behind in research that one of your neighbors might come and kill you next, right? So, and if all your mages die, heaven forbid, something you didn't plan for, which is always something that's going to happen you didn't plan for, all your mages die, like, you're out of the game. So people don't do it a lot. Now, one of the reasons people like sacreds is because you can bring a ton of power if you have, like, really good sacreds. You can bring a ton of power to a fight, like an early game fight before a lot of researchers come online, and overwhelm the enemy's defensive advantage, even though they're bringing all their combat mages, or like all their research mages, because you have a really good bless. So people don't normally like bringing all of their mages And that's the nice thing about sacreds. Now, with these guys, if you choose to bring your mages like doing this point buffing thing really early, well, which is kind of something you're geared up to do, you will suffer the downside of having kind of shitty research. So just fair warning there. All right. So early game, we have really good point buffs. We have a lot of like ability to do truly massive unit production. We have interesting things that we can do. We have good fire access, so we can do flaming arrows, and we have stealthy, very, 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 very cheap, like 5 gold cheap short bow dudes who we can also put Strength of Giants on. And the fact that they're undisciplined is actually less of an issue because you do have undisciplined or disciplined varieties as well, but they're a little bit more expensive. And I would tend to get the undisciplined ones of these guys because I think if you position them right, they'll bunch up when they get close, like in firing range of the enemy, and you can get some really good Strength of Giants off on them. And like 5 gold short bows, guys, with Strength of Giants and flaming arrows on them, these guys should do a ton of damage, right? So in the like early mid game or late early game, you're gonna have like really cool things you can do with flaming arrows. Also, as the game progresses, you can start doing like wooden warriors on clusters of your dudes. We'll talk about all that, but we also have we haven't like talked about all our troops yet. We have other bigger troops like these guys who are like super thick. 13 attack, 28 damage, 17 protection, 21 hit points. Like these guys, these are very elite melee stats. And then they've got this dude who's basically pretty much the same, a little bit less damage, but also has a longbow. And we'll talk about the significance of that. He has a bit less defense, but these guys are also super duper good. And we have the oh shit button, the Obakamono, who is like a huge ogre you can summon. And they cost no resources or recruitment points. So you can basically just turn all of your gold into Obakamono, which is really, this should be called oh shit. Right? That's what this guy is. And you can go underwater, which is really nice. There's a lot of underwater nations in Middle Age, and so you have the ability to do that. We're going to go back and go through each of these in detail. So, there's really cool things we can do in the middle game with like buffed up Daibakemono of both types. We'll talk about some of those. And then we get into thugging, right? We have a lot of different flavors of commanders. But we can do some pretty interesting thugging with Shootin' Doji. I'll show you some of these little combos we can do. This is like super budget thugging. Using the Uba as a fluffer. The Uba is going to be an important buffer fluffer for both the like Shootin' Doji thugs I'm going to show you how to do, and for your Daibakemono. And these guys have the ability to basically super combatant. I would say they're like super combatant. They're like low-end super combatant, high-end thugs, depending on where you want to place them. Problems in this form is that they're old. If you get rid of old age, which you can if you take the Unaging Bliss, this is your only well, not only sacred. It's almost your only sacred. You also get a little goblin shaman, right? But I think that's it. No sacred troops. Right, if you take Unaging on this guy, you can get this down where the encumbrance is only 3. They make much better cast, like retail casters. Like if you want to cast Horde of Skeletons, they do a lot better with 3 encumbrance. But they have a ton of path access, right? They're going to get... These are the 4 paths they already have. And they're going to get an extra one. So they could be Fire 3, Water 2, Earth 3, or Death 3. Those are all good. We'll talk about what they all do. But if you white mage this guy, he basically gets twice as many hit points, better attack and defense, 0 encumbrance, a bunch of things. He's pretty tough. And these are really good paths for super combatanting. Like very good. So we'll talk about all that. I want to talk a little bit about how to win the game with these guys too before we go into like this super deep dive on units. I think the early game and early middle game are actually reasonably straightforward. It's not like you can't snooze through it, right? Like you have to show up. There's things that can ruin you, and we'll show you some of the things that can ruin you here. But you have a pretty good outline of a plan, and we'll go through what it is in the early game and the mid game. And we have some things, like we scale well, right? Like we don't have cap-only sacreds we're dependent on. We have a lot of troops. We can kind of swarm the map, right? However, we have some weaknesses in Nation. Like the things that are often like the best paths in the game, like Astral, super good for late game. Blood, super good in the late game. Like we don't have those. Those are things, by the way, Vedheim gets. Always going to be comparing these guys to Vedheim. The other thing that's really good is air access, right? Like air access is super duper good. And high nature access is also really useful. We don't really get high nature access. We get some nature access. But without like some sort of artifact, we also can't communion up, right? Like we have pretty high path mages like this dude, but we can't really easily communion up. And we'll talk about how we might be able to do that, but we're lacking some things that really give us the ability to scale, even though we're a really good scales nation. Like, we can't do communions to get arbitrarily high-level magic for, like, fights. We don't have really high nature. We don't have air magic. We don't have astral. We don't have blood. And those are not going to be problems for us, really, in the early game or in the mid game. Like, we'll be fine. But in the late game, that's a bit of a problem. So one idea when playing this nation is you just put your head down and you just say, look, we're not going to let it make it to the late game. Now, that's a lot of pressure, right? Because it forces you to maybe be more aggressive than you want to be in diplomacy. If people figure out that this is your mindset, they're going to be pretty inclined to want to take you out. Like, if people know that you have to win by turn 60 or turn 50 or whatever it is, like turn 45, they're going to be pretty inclined to not, like, turn their back to you, right? Because you're either going to throne rush or go and try to kill them. So I don't know. I think it's like when you know somebody's really has an aggressive build, like you really need to pay attention to them. If somebody doesn't have an aggressive build, you can kind of leave. I mean, like everybody's trying to win the game, but you can kind of leave them alone and worry about it later, right? Because they're building up for something else. You know, that said, a build which is designed to win by turn 45, you also may not want to mess with, right? Because they've got a lot. They're front loading their build for a lot of early strength. And if they don't play aggressive, like if they have a build where they need to be aggressive, but they don't play aggressive, well, then they're basically out of the game. So, you know, anyway. One way to play this nation is you kind of ignore the late game, right? And you're like, this is definitely a nation which can just try to get completely out of control. And you can produce a ton of units. And it is the kind of nation that... Like, imagine you're playing on a 12-player map. You eat one neighbor, right? But everybody eats a neighbor, right? And so you're down to like 6v6. I mean, you're down to like 6 players instead of 12. Of course, the game doesn't really work like that. Not everybody's going to do it. So let's say you're down to 8, and you're one of the 2 cap nations. People start kind of looking at the next war. Will you win your next war super fast? So you're up to 3 caps. And other people are like, oh man, we can't, like... We haven't won our next wars. Let's just stop and all like knife Shinuyama, right? You do that and you eat like a 4th cap. If you're lucky, if you get like a good blow in there, like this is the kind of nation that like when you're in that spot, it's going to be stressful because everybody's trying to kill you. But that's when you just like tighten your belt and you go fight and kill everybody. And it's going to be hard. It's not like an easy thing to do. I'm like, you just do it. But there is a thing. It's like one of the things in Dominions. Sometimes when you get at like the most stressful point in the game, because like everybody's trying to kill you, that can be, and it will feel maybe a little unjustified, but that may be the point in the game where it's actually the critical moment where you win. You want to be very careful about getting in those types of situations if you're not prepared for it. A lot of nations can't really handle it. Shinuyama, depending on what the nations are, all the matchups and things like this, quality of the players, you totally might be able to handle that kind of situation with these guys. And you just bear into the pressure. So I think that's probably a very good way to win with this nation. If you're going into the late game, if you're going to go deep late game, you have magic diversity issues you're going to have to sort out somehow. Right, you can try to get lucky with indie mages. You can fix some of these paths on your pretender god. Yeah, I think those are basically the ways. So with that, let's, how far are we into? We're 20 minutes. We haven't really talked too much about units. Yeah, I mean, well, let me talk, how do we win in the late game? In the late game, you have to fix some of these magic diversity issues that you have. I think the thing that you still have the ability to do, like you can doomstack pretty hard, especially like Army of Gold's really nice. Will of Fates, guys, is amazing on this nation. Like breaking into Astral is so key. But I think the thing that you can do really well as this nation is apply pressure. Right? And that's kind of why like it's a momentum nation. Like if you have a lot of low resource units, you know, if you play this nation really slow, you can kind of get into a, you know, it can not feel great. The other thing you don't have as this nation is a lot of magic phase options. You have some. And some of them will be remote summons like Arouse Hunger and stuff. But you don't have a lot. You don't have Cloud Trapezing dudes very easily. So anyway. That is that. Let's go on and look at the units. We'll start by looking at all the kinds of Bakemono. So first of all is we have a brand of Bakemono that wears furs, right? If they're wearing furs, these are like the hillbillies of the goblins, right? They're mountain folk, and they don't see the big goblin cities every day. They are your cheapest to recruit. All of these are 5 gold in mountains. They are dirt freaking cheap in mountains, right? So they're 7 gold normally, whereas other types are 8 or even 9 gold, depending on the one we're looking at. But these guys get a 2 discount, whereas the other guys get a 1. So like these guys, if you were to look at like this is like the Rolls Royce of Bakemono, right? So like this guy, he's 8 gold compared to 5 gold in a mountain for the other dudes. So it's almost, the other dudes you almost get, I mean, it's like a 60% cost increase to pick up this guy. And so it's a pretty major cost increase. But these guys still hit just as hard. They still have an 11 attack, 15 damage youre. It's a length 4 weapon. It's almost like a pike, right? It's pretty freaking good. And slamming these guys is pretty solid. They don't have good armor. They don't have good morale. They don't have good magic resistance. They do have stealth. They do not, and they're not disciplined. Right? So all these guys here, which are their recruit in any Highlander mountain, you get a discount when you recruit them there. So you kind of, it's nice to build a fort, but you don't need to. You can just slam these guys and, you know, just have a tremendous amount of troops on the cheap. The ones I would look at using for this are going to be this guy, the youre, and then the short bow. The short bow, depending who you're fighting, may not be very good until you get flaming arrows. But when there's going to be a window, asterisk, depending who you're fighting and what turn it is, there's usually a window where short bows and flaming arrows are going to do some work. So I would totally make and they're stealthy, right? So you can have them run around, surprise people. It's one of the things like people will be like, you know, archery's bad or whatever, Arrowfin, Storm. Yeah, you know, archery's bad when you get Arrowfin and Storm. But, you know, people aren't going to have Arrowfin and Storm every single fight and make them cast Arrowfin and Storm every single fight, right? And move these guys around. They think they need Arrowfin and Storm. You move them out, they cast it, they don't need it. Surprise people with these guys. Like, anyway, these are the ones to look at. Now, I think in a lot of ways, this is like the superior archer to the other kinds. This I don't think. I think even though this is the cheapest Bakemono show, I kind of prefer the ones that aren't undisciplined. So for these, I would probably, like if you have unforded mountains, I would probably tend to go with the Bakemono archer. Right? If you have forded mountains, you don't need to get these crappy fur dudes. You can get like the upgraded dude, these guys. And that's probably what I would get if I put a fort in a mountain. So moving on to the goblins that we get in forts, we've got these dudes. They have way better armor. So they've got this armor, 12 body protection versus these guys that have 7. Now, if they get hit in the head, they're dead. But that is the way of the goblin. Again, I think these stats, 9 defense? Yeah. I think these attack and defense stats are the same. They're 1 gold more. Basically, it's to have better armor and to get rid of the undisciplined flag. They're also a bit more resources, but these are cheap in terms of resources. They're a lot more in terms of recruitment points out there. 3 times the amount of recruitment points and twice the resources. So, I mean, that is definitely something to consider. You can get way more of these dudes than you can get of these. And numbers, size, well, numbers matter, right? Because you really want to be outnumbering your enemy with Bakemono. Like, the advantage of having Bakemono is overwhelming them on the front line because you're bringing, like, 6 guys to their 3, right? But if y'all are bringing the same total number of troops, they'll end up surrounding your Bakemono, and then the fact that you have 6 per tile doesn't matter because you're 1 tile surrounded by like 3. Right, so you do want to outnumber them. So I think which one you get kind of just depends on exactly how hard you need to slam the button. For casual raiding, where you're not bringing any mage support, there's not a big malice to getting these guys. You can totally slam them. However, once you're wanting to start to bring any point buffing mage support, it is kind of nice to have guys who are going to sit there and take buffs for a few turns and not run off into combat. You can also put them on guard commander, and we'll talk about some of those shenanigans in a minute. Next up, we have the Bakemono archer. This is the guy with basically the same, except he's more expensive now. I'd go with the other dude. You don't really need to script archers very much. These guys are also not stealthy, so I would totally go with these guys. I think this is like by far the superior archer unit. Oh, these guys aren't stealthy either. Ooh, I don't think I realized that. I don't think I realized that when I was like looking at this preparing. I haven't played these guys as a warning. Ooh, so these are stealthy. Ugh. So I think the way these guys are used mostly for raiding. Ugh. Yeah, these guys are still going to be way better for point buffing. So I think the way I would look at it is these guys are going to be part, like your army is not going to be super stealthy. It can be, but I don't know. I feel like for your army where you're going to be having mage support, probably less of these guys. I could be wrong. I mean, these are both good. Nobody's going to laugh at you depending on which type you make. Like, they're basically very similar, but losing the stealth, paying more money and losing the stealth tag hurts. But these guys are going to be way more units when point buffed. And it's going to be way easier to point buff them. So that's why you get them. Next up, we have the Benditos. These guys, in my opinion, have basically one thing that they do. And they can pillage. They're really cheap and they can pillage. So if you're wanting to do pillage, this pillage also gives you the raid command. What does that mean? It means you can go like you can pillage an adjacent province. It's a kind of weird thing. I'll make some because you can't really You won't know what I'm talking about until we do it. Get a Bandito leader. So here's how the raid command works. You put your dudes. The commander has to have the raid command. But you go like this. You have to. So he has no raid command here. You can see there's pillage, whatever. You move it to another province, and then you click a raid. So it's weird. And you see it gives this weird like down and back arrow. And when you hit in turn, you can see that it pillaged a province that wasn't ours. If they have PD here, they can catch the raid, and then there's a battle. So you have to be careful about that. And it's like getting patrolled out from like if there were unrest or something. So if there's like, let's say you sent 4 commanders pillaging and they catch you, they will fight the 4 in sequence, I believe. So they will defeat you in detail, basically. Okay, so what else? We've got... let's pull up the national overview screen. So we have these guys. I think they're pretty much not noteworthy. Like, I would rather have goblins. I don't know what to tell you. Unless you're going to use the pillage, don't get them. But it's kind of cool having these guys who can pillage. I mean, these aren't really horrible. Like, I think they're fine units. I think they're just kind of worse than goblins. You have this guy who's 9 gold. The thing that's noteworthy here is this is 13 attack. It's pretty high damage. It's, I mean, compared to the Youre, it's the same. It comes in like a slashing variety, which is fine. Like a bonus to attack is pretty significant. These guys, I bet you if you like run the tests versus certain types of units, these guys are better. However, I mean, we're in the realm of being like a bit more expensive. Like 9 gold, it's even more resources and recruitment points. I feel like the Youre probably just is better. Like, it's probably better having a reliable Pierce. It's probably better having more of them. I mean, it's really not a ton more. It's only 1 more gold for 2 more attack. If they have any better stats, I might do it. Like 10, 9 hit points, 10 strength. Ooh, 9 strength. So the Youre actually does a bit more damage. Yari's also 2-handed. This is 1-handed. So it's going to take less. Like, the Youre is going to get better with Strength of Giants. You get a bonus damage point from that. I feel like the Youre is probably better, but I could be wrong. 2 attack does make a much bigger difference than you might think. So I don't know. I'm open to the idea that these guys are just as good as the Youre guys, but I think the meta right now is more like around the Youre. But the meta's wrong all the time, guys. Like, this could be fine. The other thing to consider about this is these units don't have great morale. So and their defense skill isn't amazing, right? So taking like a length 1 weapon is risky. So I think that probably is what cans these dudes. Because there's a lot of things where they'll get repelled to death. Because they don't have good morale. And they don't have good defense. And they have a length 1 weapon. So that's probably what cans them. And this is a length 4 weapon, so you get a little bit of a repel yourself. And most importantly, the repel yourself doesn't really matter very much. The fact that you're not getting repelled is probably what's going to matter a lot more. The Kappa, these guys are kind of cool. They are not very good on land. They fatigue out real fast. But they have recuperation, and then they have these Kopos, which cause a limp. You can get these guys just like out of your capital. And you can use them to conquer like underwater systems. It's also worth getting just if somebody's running at you with a god or something, or some hero or something you really want to mess up. It's kind of nice to just put a few in the army. Like even just putting like 4 or 5 mixed in with the PD to like get a limp on the pretender. You know, I'm always one to do that. Go ahead and get the affliction in when you can. They're expensive though. They're not amazing. right? Like, you kind of need a lot of them to conquer underwater. They're fine. They have pretty good protection. But, you know, like, the attack and defense aren't anything to write home about. They're fine. But I would not be thinking, like, you're going to be kicking underwater nations out of underwater with these guys. They're not really going to measure up to, like, good underwater troops. And this is the era with, like, the scariest underwater nations, right? But you can use this, you know, if there's an underwater nation near you dying, you want to siege down a fort or something, these guys can totally do it. And you should be able to control, like, lakes and stuff around you if there's not an underwater nation present. These guys are pretty special. Very high protection. You have to think this is going to be jumping up to, like, 19 or 20 with Legions of Steel. I'm not quite sure how that's going to mix with the natural protection. That's why I'm not sure if it's 20. But, yeah. And then this is a two-handed weapon. With Strength of Giants, I think this goes up to 33, is I believe the math. So it's a 13 damage, a 13 attack, 33 damage weapon. And these guys are going to be sitting pretty close to, like, 20 protection. This is with, like, pretty basic research. It's like Enchant 3. Probably like Conjuration 3, Enchant 3, Construction 3. And they're going to be very, very frightening with that. It's a Link 2 weapon, which is pretty okay. And then 21 protection. 21 hit points. These guys are super solid. I don't think, you could expand with these and it'd be worth, like, looking at. And maybe it's the kind of thing where it's nice mixing them in with your Bakemono. You know, they'll absorb some of the hits. The Bakemono will help kind of harass and whittle things down. And these guys will, like, one-hit kill Heavy Cav when they hit them, which might cause the Bakemono, like, a tiny bit of frustration. The Bakemono will be able to kill Heavy Cav, but these are also, like, going to be better at killing some types of elites, and that's, like, asterisks, because Bakemono, especially with buffs, can kill elites. But these guys can't too. Sometimes you just want really high damage. So that's something to think about for these guys. They take buffs pretty well. This is, like, a super solid unit. I think, though, this unit is generally going to be superior. Dark Vision 50. These guys have Dark Vision too? Yeah. So the reason that I think these guys are superior is the longbow. And the longbow is not important because you want to be killing like a 25 gold longbow is not good. The longbow is important for getting these guys to hold still while you buff them up. And what you can have them do is, like, you get Legions of Steel on them, maybe Strength of Giants, and then you have them, like, in front of some Skelly spammers. And with this, they're going to be a pretty formidable front line. And they're going to be sitting there shooting while they take all the buffs. And your Uba can be dropping all sorts of buffs on them. And then be, like, once they're done with the buffing, there'll be skeletons and stuff percolating around while these guys shoot arrows. When things close in melee with these guys, they'll tear them apart. And when they run out of arrows, which doesn't take very long, they've only got 12 ammunition. So that'll be round 12. They run out of ammo, they're going to charge in with the skeletons and blender stuff with a 13 attack, and this is going to be this also is still a two-handed weapon, so yeah, it's going to be 31 damage, no dachi. They're going to just really tear stuff apart. So this is, and the other thing, like, if you're in the camp, like, the goblins are always better, there's some things that are going to freaking wreck goblins. Like, things that trample are really good against goblins. Things that do area of effect damage, really good against goblins. Things that trample and do area of effect damage, not so great against Dai Bakemono. Right? Like, it's not going to be as good. You know? Like, fire elementals, not going to super, like, kill these guys. We'll talk about how we deal with fire elementals and air elementals, because there are ways. And then the Bakemono. This guy, I think you want to avoid getting unless you got caught with your pants down. They do have, I think, higher strength than the other dudes. Yeah, by a margin. So you could consider these guys for, like, siege chaff or something. Okay, for the commanders, We have some kind of interesting things. We have scouts we get, which are extra cheap. They're cheaper than your normal scout. We have these dudes who are kind of interesting. They're an assassin with spirit sight, blind. They have a rather high damage weapon, but no armor. So, and they have fear, which is the other kind of interesting thing. They're expensive for assassins, but you can recruit a lot of them. You get 1 commander point a turn. The thing is, in like a lot of times there will be battles at night. In a night battle, these guys are going to do pretty good. And I forget what the odds are. It's about, I think it's like 50-50 or something like that for like whether it's a night battle for assassinations. In a night battle, they'll do pretty good. If it's not a night battle, you can use these guys to do assassin expansion. So I've heard. I've not tested. I wouldn't be surprised that you can, but I imagine you suffer a bit of attrition. Like having 0 protection, it's a bit of a zinger. Like, you know, even like a mounted commander is going to have like armor and a shield. I feel like he's going to win if it's a daytime battle pretty regularly. But you never know, like the fear can proc and then, you know, you win and that's that. That being said, just having access to like an assassin, you can put any of the assassin items on them and then they can kind of work. So that is an important thing, especially if you have a lot of money to throw around, you know, have a spare fort you can use to make some of these. You know, it's going to be okay. You know, you have to be careful about putting gear on them though, because especially with like my improved casting AI mod on, enemy mages you assassinate with gems on them should probably murder these guys, even with some moderate, you know, like a handful of acorns or something, like some assassin item. The really cheap assassin items are like handful of acorns, amulet of the dead, bottle of water, like basically the things that summon stuff. So that's what to look out for with these guys. I would consider making 1 squad of them and trying to do like maybe take 2 provinces through assassin expansion just to help you, especially if you're doing like a scales build to help kind of get off the ground at the beginning. But I don't think, lean more into it than that. Have 1, you know, maybe make 4 of these guys, try to get like a squad going. Bakemono Chief, pretty cheap, 40 gold, decent leadership, stealthy. These guys are pillage leaders. That's really the only important thing about them. Kappa Chiefs can go underwater. They have recuperation too, which is kind of cool. They're kind of pricey. The Bakemono General, they have pretty good leadership, and that's going to be important. This is really nice to put our little goblins in lines. Well, all of our troops in lines. So, yeah, these guys I think are pretty solid. You're probably going to be wanting some of them. Interestingly, these guys are also 80 leadership. So you can also use the Shootin' Doji for leading your squads around. And the Shootin' Doji are actually a little more expensive though. So I think if it's just like leading commanders around, the Shootin' Doji will also die from like random arrows and things. These guys are obviously going to be a lot more robust in most cases. However, the Shootin' Doji do make better thugs, I think. But we'll talk about that. You could thug these guys out if you want to. I don't think it's you need to point buff them, right? And put probably I don't even know how much gear. A little bit of gear. Thing is, like, if you're not putting any gear, you're probably better off just point buffing troops. Shootin' Doji, these guys are really interesting. So we have the 80 leadership, which we already talked about. They have a lot of hit points. This is like way more than a normal human hit point. The lore for these is kind of interesting. They're mortal vampires. So they have a life drain attack. There are significant things about this life drain attack. This is not partial life drain. Like if you put a weapon on, like an asthame or something, it's partial life drain. What that means is that it caps the amount of like life and fatigue you can steal from this. This is like the vampire one. It's not capped and it's armor piercing. So that means it's going to scale pretty well with strength. And these guys have pretty high strength. So it's already 14. So anything you do to get this strength up is going to make these guys kind of nuts. And I'm going to show you right now how to thug with them. So we'll do it right here. We'll get it set up. I'll just have Yis come in here and take this. And guys, like I could put a lot of items on them and show you, hey, look, you can thug with these. But that would not be very interesting, would it? So we're going to do it with no items. So what we want is we want an earth random here. And we want 3 of these guys, and we're going to move them in. Okay. And what we are going to do is give them hold and then attack. You can also do this, by the way, with only... Oh, we'll do it with 2. Yeah, we'll do it with 2. There's a thing you can do... Okay. The reason you might want to do it with 3 is you could do Touch of Madness, I think, if they don't have a magic path, and that would actually be a really nice buff to have on them. So this is going to be a little finicky. You can put this behind PD or something, or you can raid into enemy PD, but we're going to do Iron Warriors. You can do this before you have Iron Warriors use protection. It's not going to be nearly as good. So we're going to do Iron Warriors, and then we're going to need an Earth Gem and a Water Gem. Then we're going to do Moss Body. Then we're going to do Enlarge, which will also need a Nature Gem. And then we're going to do Quickness. And we'll have this guy cast spells. He'll probably run. He may die too. But he probably won't die because he has the second cat form. These guys turn into a cat. We haven't really talked about the Ubas. But I want to show you these guys thugging in action. And I think that will work. And on Yis's side, let's have this guy. Okay, we have got a Dryad unit here. We'll put a 70 or something. So the cool thing about Shuten Doji is they have this sleep bar, which you'll see popping up. It doesn't affect friendly, so you can actually bury these guys in your front line. And unlike chill auras or other things, which like a lot of the auras cause friendly fire, this thing won't. And this life drain attack, especially when they're enlarged, look, they've only been in combat a little bit. They're already up to 30 hit points, 40 hit points. All right, these things are freaking monsters. Okay, they did kill the Uba because it got surrounded. We probably should have had a retreat. But you can see they're pretty good. And I've never seen people use these guys as thugs, so I'm just going to take credit and assume we're inventing that here. But yeah, you can see these guys are absolutely ridiculous. And like I said, 0 items. Right? Like, not a lot of dudes can do 0 items and take out like 100 PD or 70 PD. So, yeah, there we go. There's our old man thug. The Shuten Doji. Also good as leaders, so you can be leading your goblins around, put like a lion pelt on them, have them wade into combat with your goblins. They'll be putting stuff to sleep with the aura. Totally, these make very good, for that reason, they make very good army thugs to just mix up there in your front line. With a pretty high hit points, they will tend to draw some aggro, though, from like spellcasters and stuff. So, you know, decide how you want to use them. The thing, there is like a bit of a conflict in that, like, if you want to do all that point buffing I was showing, that doesn't normally combine, like 5 rounds of point buffing doesn't really synergize with being an army thug. So with being an army thug, you know, you're going to take like some buffs in the first couple rounds and then run in, right? Otherwise, you're really just going to be like spectating combat. Then we have these guys, the Shamans. These you can get in Highlands and Mountains. And I can't... Oh, we'll check this real quick. I can't remember if you need a lab and a temple. Yeah, it needs a lab and a temple. If it's 100%, you need If it's 90%, you don't need a lab, but if it's 100%, you do. These guys are inept researchers. If you take Magic 3, they're okay bang for the buck. Like, if we compare research efficiency, the Ubas and the Shamans. So the Shamans are 80 gold, so you're paying 32 a year, and you're going to get 5. This is going to jump up to 8 in Magic 3. Right? The Ubas, they get way more per 13, but it's like 3 times as much gold per year, right? So in Magic 3, the other guys were 8. These guys are going to be 16. So these guys, in terms of like for just researching in Magic 3, they are 3 times as much upkeep per turn for twice as much research. But you're getting a lot more per fort turn, you know? And in anything other than Magic 3, I think it's pretty obvious that the Ubas are going to be better. Because these guys in Drain 3 are 2 research a turn, right? So these guys do not research very well in Drain. The other thing of note about these Shamans is they're stealthy. Now, your Uba are stealthy in their other form, in their Ghost Cat form. So let me show you that. So they can change into this Ghost Cat. The Ghost Cat, they're going to lose Magic Pass, so you can switch them back into this other form once they arrive in combat if they're stealth moving. And you know, the way you do that is you do change shape, and that will turn them into the... Like, I'll just show you. You change shape and then cast spells. So they're going to run into combat, and the first turn they go boop. Somebody has the Ark of the Covenant here? What the hell? Well, that's special. Anyhow, the Uba. And this guy comes in with, what is the deal with the artifacts here? We got a random event. They gave this guy to us with an artifact. Why won't this ever happen to me in a game? Why does it have to be while I'm doing a national overview? Damn it. But yeah, so these guys, did we finish talking about them? Oh yeah, so these guys are stealthy, so you can have them run around. They're also fire. They're your only fire mages. Well, your Uba don't get fire. Your only fire mage, aside from your other fire mage, the Uba don't get it. Right? This is going to be your main research monkey, in my opinion, most of the time. If you really want to penny pinch on that, on the upkeep for researching, you can pick these guys. The fire ones are nice because you can, you know, even a fire 1, you can do a fire gem to get them up to fire 2 and then spend 2 fire gems per fire elemental, right? Water 1s is a good path. Earth 1s, not a great path. I wonder what my computer's doing. It's got the little arrow. I mean, the hourglass. You know, Earth 1, not amazing, but you can do the same thing with fire. Spend an Earth gem, get up to Earth 2, and then spend 2 Earth gems per Earth 3 spell you want to cast. Or, you know, you do like Shrink the Giants for 1 Earth gem, or like Earth Elementals for 2. Death 1 is pretty bad. I mean, you can do Animate Skeletons. It's not like the end of the world. It's pretty bad. So, these guys aren't really amazing. Like, compared to Vedheim again, the little shamans, like the woodland shamans you get for Vedheim, in my opinion, are significantly better. Because you get Blood 1, which is better. You get Astral 1, which is better. You get Nature 1, which is better. And you get Water 1, which is better. Like, all the paths you get with the Vedheim little shaman are good. This is a bit more hit and miss. It's a bit more miss is what it is. Anyway, it's fine. You can make it. I think what you want to do, though, is just all your forts make these guys, unless you're making a Bakemono Sorcerer. We'll talk about when to do the Bakemono Sorcerer. But These guys are really good. So they're water 1, death 1, nature 1. And you get all those paths again, plus earth. Right? So if you get one of these other paths, you're basically going to be 2 in that. So you're going to be looking to be like a water 2, a death 2, or a nature 2. Right? Water 2, you can be dropping quickness. You can do water elementals. Death 2, that's horde of skeletons. It's pretty much the only thing you do with death 2s, but it's really good. Nature 2, interesting. We can do foul vapors traps, especially comboed with an earth dude who's going to do like iron warriors and stuff on your dudes. So, or like comboed with the Bakemono sorcerer who's going to help super combatant while you slam foul vapors. So these guys are at like the Pangea level for like cancerous foul vapors traps. So these guys can do that. That's the Nature 2. Nature 2 is also just a great path, guys. It's like, you can do enlarge, you can do all this point buffing. But probably most importantly is you can just do casual mass protection. Like all the nations that have Nature 2s, like once they get Alt 7, they just put like mass protection every fight if they want to. It's pretty cool. The Earth ones seem like they're not good, but... And like, I was smack talking a little bit like Earth 1 Shamans. I was like, oh, it's not great. It's not great until you need to put a gem on them to cast Iron Warriors, and you can use that to kill a whole army, like we did with the with our, oh god, what are they called? Shooting dojis. I probably said it wrong too. But why I like it better on these guys is because like usually you want to do like 1 or 2 things with the earth. And then like after that, they're not good for much. For these ones, like these are good cross paths. So like you can have, like if you're buffing with earth, you can do like the Iron Warriors script 1, and then you can do, Moss Body and other stuff in the other scripts. The other thing that's noteworthy is, I guess we'll say it here, but you have a lot of different ways to like death earth. So you can do like shade mails and stuff if you want to. A lot of cool things you can do. But these guys are like the workhorse mage, right? So we're going to be casting quickness. We're going to be doing strength of giants. We're going to be doing, like even early in the game, moss body, protection buffs, right? Like just doing protection, like the Alt 3, I think, spell for nature. All of them can do skeletons. You can do horde of skeletons. The earth ones, you can even put on like a skull staff if you want to do summon earth power with an earth gem, drop horde of skeletons. The other thing that's noteworthy is you can shape change into this ghost cat, and you will do it before you die. So if these guys are like running off the battlefield and they switch forms, a lot of times this ghost cat will just like run off. And the final thing we need to talk about is these guys can twice spawn. And they have a kind of cool way to do it. So let's do, we'll make a thistle mace here. And we will do twice spawn, which is going to be cheap because we're in human form. I don't think if we change shape, this is a size 3. I think we still get like a normal... Like, did they steal him? No. But yeah, he just came back as a human mage. However, how freaking ever, you can do, anytime you have the nature death cross path, it's opening up things. You would probably want to do it on your earth randoms, right? So you do twice born. I mean, you could do it on whichever ones you want, but I think it's probably best on the earth randoms. Twice born, and then you do transformation. And that didn't work. We'll cast it again. Transformation, by the way, works better if you take... didn't get feeble-minded, but we became a foul spawn. It works better if you're in luck scales. We're in luck 3 right now. So, okay, here we go. We got a size 5. And then you can run them in and have them die. And so you do like personal region, attack closest. Okay, and he's back as a white mage. So, yeah, you can get dudes like this who are pretty spooky. He gained a nature path somewhere along the way. And yeah, I mean, you can see there's a really scary chassis. To do to get these, it's a little like, I think transformation's nature, alt 6. So you can't get it super early, but having a few of these guys running around is pretty spooky. In some ways, these are going to be better than the other thugs. They're different, right? The other type of thug or super combatant we get on this nation is the Bakemono sorcerer, which I think we're going to talk about now, maybe. So these guys, is there anything left to say about the Uba? Oh, well, we talked about how they switch forms. The other thing I want to say about them is, I've played against these guys. One of the things you can do with this nation is like bone grinding communions using these. This is not something the nation does easily, but these guys make pretty good. Like if you put a crystal matrix or a slave matrix on these guys, they make really good comm slaves. Now, this is not something you're going to be spamming out or doing a ton, but it's something, I was saying, like, one of the things to think about is, like, what are you going to do in the late game? These guys with comm matrices make really good comm slaves. They can soak up just a huge amount of fatigue, and they're stealthy so they can run around. But yeah, they just, for the price, they just have a lot of durability, because this guy has a lot of hit points. And yet they get to go through both forms, and I think fatigue resets between forms, but I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, but I know these guys make excellent comm slaves for like doing bone grinding bullshit, because like it's really hard to kill these guys through all the forms with bone grinding too. And the way you do it is you put the slave matrix on these guys, and then you get like a death random Bakemono sorcerer. You give them a skull staff and you put a slave matrix on them. I mean, a master matrix on them, and then you can have them just drop bone grindings. And when it was done to me, they vortexed to returning these guys out afterwards. But yeah, there's may also be ways to like have these guys buff up, like have 3 of these guys on a tile buff up. I mean, we can try it. Let's get some more of these Ubas real quick. All right. So Uba 1. Okay, we've got an Earth Uba. I don't think we're going to use the Death Uba. We'll do we have a Nature Uba? We don't. We're going to keep rolling. Nature Uba. We're going to empower if we don't have one. And so I'm going to empower. We'll pretend this one was a Nature Uba. And, okay. So we need to take this back with yes. And we'll put our 70 PD here. I don't think this is going to be as good as the Shootin' Doji, but there's going to be good parts about it. So the goal here is we want to point buff while we're in our other forms, and then we'll shape change on the last script slot. So these guys are going to do Summon Earth Power, Iron Warriors, then we're going to do... I don't really know if anything, when we do Iron Will or something. This guy, the nature one's going to do Enlarge, and then Regeneration, and what are the other nature things we need? I don't think there's a ton of nature stuff. Moss Body, maybe. The Regeneration is going to take a gem. This guy is going to do Quickness, Wave Warriors, which you can do with 2 gems. Except we should do this at the end. I mean, honestly, it's probably good to have all these guys do elemental fortitude. Breath of Winter. Wave Warriors. Where are you? Wave Warriors. And then spells. And this guy, he needs the Earth Gem. They don't have any armor, do they? No. Iron Will. I don't think there's much here for us to cast. Yeah, we'll have this guy do Elemental Fortitude. And then I think that will do it. We're going to have these guys on spells rather than attack. And then we'll have this guy. I don't think quickness is the thing here. Yeah, I don't think there's really much else for us to cast in water. Make sure we're doing Elemental Fortitude and spells. Anyway. Oh, the last thing we're going to do is shape change. We just conveniently have this slot freed up. Let's see what happens. It's kind of going to be funny. I think they're going to be size 4 units all packed in the same tile. I have 3 size 4. One of the guys didn't change shape. I don't know what's going on. I guess she's fatigued out still? Oh, from Wave Warriors? They've all run. But they can't kill him. Yeah. So yeah, they can do stupid things. This is, by the way, no gear. Anyway, that's the Uba for you. They're pretty strong. Okay, what else? Okay, now we have to talk about this dude. We've beaten the drum on everything else. So, Bakemono Sorcerer. Here's one idea: is getting rid of old age. If you do unaging on these guys, this will drop down to 3 for their encumbrance, or I don't, maybe even lower. When I did it, I saw 3, but maybe they have... Oh, they must have it built in. Oh, yeah, they have 1 encumbrance from the furs. So, yeah, it's 3, including the 1 encumbrance you get from the furs. If you get rid of... Unaging, I think, is a legit thing to consider for this nation. If you don't, you'll have a bit of old age on these guys, which can be annoying. You can get it off by doing Twiceborn with them. But... I mean, these are really good mages. You may just want a lot of them. I mean, you know, they're expensive, so how many can you really get? But, you know, they're sacred, so the upkeep at least won't completely ruin you. And if you have unaging, I feel like it's a lot less pressure to Twiceborn them. But that's just me. They're your only sacred, really, dude. Like, the Shamans are sacred. So, like, you could totally just do, like, a caster bless for them, which is going to feed in well to the other thing we were looking at, which is, like, treating them as, like, Phoenix Pirate Thugs. Also, their stats are going to be better. Like, old age, getting rid of old age is... like, if you're going to turn them into a white mage, the old age stuff doesn't matter. It's a bit of a waste. But if you're not, and you want to use a lot of these guys in combat, like, they get so much better getting rid of old age. Like, unaging is just pretty clutch on them. So I'd definitely consider it. And you can do, by the way, like a super cheap build if you want to just get unaging. Like, I mean, you could do... Like, this is actually probably one of the ideal things for it. You can... Because you probably want some MR. If you're going to be thugging with these guys. You should get some reinvigoration. And then you get unaging here. And like a poison resistance or something. How much HP do they have? 21. Yeah, I probably wouldn't pick up Resilient then. I'd probably just get minor poison resistance, something like this. And Imprisoned, you still have really good scales. So we'll talk about what like scales we should take. But these guys have on one hand, the Uba is very good at point buffing, right? And some of the things that Uba can do well, like they can do wooden warriors and stuff as our tech starts getting up to like cover a lot of goblins. We do strength of giants with some gems. But the Ubas are mostly, except for like quickening in the deep late game, and then like some, like wooden warriors and mass protection stuff, they're mostly like not area of effect buffers. These guys, the Bakemono, you get big buffs. Like basically the big earth buffs, but you can also get some kind of big water buffs. But all of them are going to be able to do Summon Earth Power and then Legions of Steel, Strength of Giants. These are really big deals for your goblins. The Earth randoms, when you get Earth 3, you put Earth Boots on them, and then you can do Summon Earth Power. That's going to get you all the way up to Earth 5, and that is the critical threshold for Weapons of Sharpness. Weapons of Sharpness on goblins is terrifying. It is really, really strong. So that's one of the things like the Earth randoms can do. You can also do like Army of Gold, very scary on goblins. Yeah, so Earth randoms, super duper good for army buffing. You definitely want to like probably really prioritize using them for that. Try not to lose any like Earth randoms as thugs. Water randoms probably your worst. Because, okay, the randoms, again, you get one in each of these paths, right? So water randoms, probably the worst. Though maybe there's some use cases for like Acid Storm. I forget the paths for Acid Storm. Yeah. Water is probably like Acid Storm. If we're looking at like special things they can do. So that's probably that. Fire, you can do all the big fire things really easily, but that includes stuff like Firestorm too. So if you remember like Pangea, they can do things like Foul Vapors traps really well because they have a lot of point buffing, but can do like Foul Vapors. These guys, we can do Acid Storm traps, Firestorm traps with these dudes. We can do a lot of things, right? These guys are pretty spooky. So yeah, fire are also good like retail fire mages. Like you have Fire Death Crosspath, so you can do the fire booster, right? If you put both fire boosters, which the fire hat's really expensive, the other fire booster is not. Like Fire 3 plus the normal fire booster gets them up to Fire 4. Phoenix Power gets them up to Fire 5. Like with a single 10 gem item, these guys can be up to Fire 5. Like with the hat, you have them at Fire 6. Like Fire 5's guys hurt. Like Flame Eruption and stuff. I think the thing too is like if you're only thinking about these guys in their white form, which will make a white form mage. If you're only thinking about them in their white form, they're kind of like a white mage for this. It feels too expensive to use them as like a retail combat mage. But these guys are fearsome in combat. So anyway, that's just, a little subtle plug for a build, something like this to get on aging, give them some reinvigoration, and really treat those Bakemono sorcerers more as casters than as thugs. That being said, they do make pretty good thugs. And I'll show you the white mage dude. I was going to have them get murdered by... Yes, I don't think we have time. Let's make some of these. I'll show you the stats they get. All right. And so basically for this, it's pretty easy. You just twice spawn them. And you run them into combat. And you let them die. And you get them back, and this is their form. And it's pretty solid. It's 40-something hit. Like, so if we just compare the hit points, it's over twice the hit points. You have a chance at rolling another death path. It's especially, I think, worth focusing on twice boarding your death randoms, because you get a shot at getting a death 4, which is really special. But yeah, I mean, we'll show you why these guys are good. We'll forge like a Phoenix Pyre kit. It's worth thinking about how you break into blood too, because one of the things you really want is Phoenix Pyre is like a flesh eater. The other thing you can have, which is pretty good, is a Hell Sword, which is this thing. We'll put a Hell Sword on him. But then you just give him like whatever, some kind of armor. We'll do reinvigoration gear, and you often want to give them also a ring of regen, because they're going to be getting pretty beat up. They're going to be getting beat up something fierce. Yeah, they're pretty spooky. So wait, where's my white mage? Here he is. So we just put all this gear on him. Oh, not the flesh eater, please. There's a million ways to build these. And you can run them in here. You can run them in with an Uba Fluffer. I just want to show you it without it. The Uba Fluffer does make them a bit better, so it's definitely worth doing. But the core things are really just Summon Earth Power, Soul Vortex, Phoenix Pyre. The other things are more like nice to have. Our base protection's 12. Like we can do. I would actually do Temper Flesh first before like Iron Skin. Yeah, I feel pretty okay about that. I don't think we'll put this person on an advancing cast so that she has a decent shot at killing this guy. Because otherwise we won't get to see Phoenix Pyre go. It's interesting she's Thunder Striking. A lot of times the AI won't do that versus guys with shock resistance. Yeah, okay. You can see. The guy's hard to kill, okay? He's hard to kill. We didn't get Phoenix Pyre to go. I mean, we can get it. One second. Let's get Phoenix Pyre to go here. Let's get a few of you guys. And let's make some of these things. I mean, there's a lot of ways to kill. The thing is, like, you don't want to lean too hard on this. Like, I think it's one of the things, like, if you're stomping noobs, you're like, oh, I'm going to make a ton of these dudes. We're going to kill them all. And it kind of works. But the thing is that... Wait, how did we get goblins over here? All right, wait 1 second. Get those goblins to go away. Oh wait. This guy needs gems too. Okay, fortunately he doesn't have any like path lowering afflictions. For yes, the script we want to do is the only thing that's really important here is quickness, quicken self, and liquid body. And I think that will do it. Now, because he's not getting surrounded by chaff and these guys are really fast, they're able to kill him with Phoenix Pyre. But, I mean, guys, there's a million ways to kill Phoenix Pyre dudes, but they can be pretty annoying. But I will say in multiplayer games, I'm consistently underwhelmed by Phoenix Pyre thugs. Usually people put a lot of gear on them and then they die and don't do very much. However, when they work, it is extremely vexing for the enemy. So it is definitely a way to kind of style on people, killing them with Phoenix Pyre thugs. The thing, though, is like, my advice, if you play this nation and you build you get your bless and it's all about reinvigoration. Like, okay, the build I was just suggesting was reinvigoration, which happens to be a little nice for doing Phoenix Pyre stuff. But, like, that's not, we got unaging, so we didn't need to do white mage thugs. And, like, you can do, especially if you have unaging, you can do Phoenix Pyre with this chassis. You don't need to turn him into a white mage. But you have more encumbrance and other problems. All that aside, the point I was making is that if you over rely on those guys as super combatants, like, they're not that hard to counter, right? Like, most of their value is in kind of a surprise. Like, maybe the enemy knows it might happen, but they kind of don't know where or what have you. If you're doing it all the time, it's not that hard to counter, all right? If you're doing it sometimes, it's going to, but you have other really strong things that you're deploying, it's going to be very hard to counter. Right, so I think it's like, I don't think it's like half of the nation or 25% of the nation. I think it's like the Phoenix Pyre thug, like thugging with these dudes is a thing. It's valuable. You should definitely do it, but don't like overinvest in it unless you're against new players. Against newer players who aren't going to be able to like figure out the counter, then they'll just be like hopelessly shamed, right? But They can be pretty easily countered if you know it's coming. And if you look at the guy I sent in, he had a fair amount of gear on him, right? So, like, you can lose a ton of gems by kitting these guys out and running them in and having them die and give the gear to the enemy. That being said, you know, if you buff them with these dudes with, like, you know, enlarge and moss body and other things, they'll be better. So, and you can do like mix the thugging with foul vapors, traps and stuff. There's a bunch of things you can do to make it better. And do look at doing those. I'm just saying, like, don't over rely on it. That being said, it's a strong strategy. So anyway, make of that what you will. But yeah, these guys are also really good casters. They can do summon earth power. Like the death randoms too, definitely put a skull staff on them. Okay, let me just show you this. All right. The things we're going to need, we're just going to need a few things. We are going to need, no, we don't get nature air. That would be a really great cross path for us to have right here. So what we're going to need is we're going to need some boots. We're going to need this thing. And it's not another really cheap reinvigoration item that I can think of. We'll make a lion pelt for him, though. So this is more like the caster dude, but like totally worth for your death randoms putting a skull staff on them for being just a retail. Like, this is not a high gem investment, guys. I mean, there's a little bit, is like 20 gems, you know, minus 8. So it's like if you have a hammer, not a super huge investment. Now, we are old, right? This would be much better if you took an unaging bless, right? But you do this. You do summon earth power. You do soul vortex. You do iron skin. And then you do horde of skeletons. Or what you probably want to do, because they're going to be getting close, you probably do some life drains to reset, and then you cast spells. The nice thing about this guy is he mixes into an army much better. He's doing Cloud of Death, Flame Eruption. He's pretty spooky. He got a lot of afflictions, though. But you also, and if you really want to be crazy, you could take unaging and recuperation. Recuperation doesn't work with old age, but if you have unaging, and I think you can technically afford both, it'd be wildly expensive. If you turn them into a white mage, you can use recuperation on them because they won't be old. But recuperation won't work unless you first strip off old age. Anyway. I didn't even really show you what I wanted to here. We got a... Oh, we didn't lose any paths. Can we... Let's see if I can keep these guys from closing and do Horde of Skeletons here, because that was really what I wanted to show you. It's just the quantity of Horde of Skeletons this guy can produce. No, it's not really that ridiculous. But, I mean, it's a fair amount. Over the course of like a 100-turn battle, it's a lot. Here we have the spellcasting AI on, so it does really like dropping... If the enemy bunches up, it likes dropping nukes on them more than just mindlessly doing Horde of Skeletons. So anyway, these are super versatile, and obviously you scale really well because you can spam out a ton of these guys. They can also do Rigor Mortis. They can do Flaming Arrows, which I think is really important for like early mid-game. They can do a bunch of things. Acid Storm, Firestorm. They can do so much stuff, guys. They can do a lot of things. Probably most importantly, too, it's like Legions of Steel Strength Giants. Like the basics. Weapons of Sharpness. Those things are all really good. We are at almost an hour and a half. I want to close by talking a little bit about Pretender designs, about how you fight in the... Like how you win the game. A little bit about how you fight your first war, and then also about how you win the game. So, Pretender designs, you can go like some silly thug blast, like, oh, we're going to get all the things for this dude. I don't think you get all the things for this dude, right? I think you're a scales nation. You don't like all in on a thugging strategy, which can exceptionally easily be countered, especially if you're playing on like white maging them, right? Like, a few dust-to-dust casters are going to kill them, or like flying thugs with holy scourges are going to like murder them. So don't all in on the thugs, guys. You're a scales nation with thug options, in my opinion. So I would say take like pretty damn close to full scales. Like for Pretender design, I would go... You have a few options. One, in my opinion, you can get anything, really. Don't get a Titan. Maybe you get a Titan. One of the things you don't have is magic phase access, so being able to magic phase is nice. I think, honestly, I would go this. I would do exactly what I just showed you guys. That is, so far, my build of choice. It breaks you into Astral, so it solves one of our major problems. I would maybe go this. Well, let's see. So we're going to go Reinvigoration 2. Right, we're going to go Magic Resistance. And we're going to go Unaging. And Minor Poison Resistance. And we're just going to take the best scales. Now, one thing to consider on scales is, especially as a scales nation... You will struggle if you take... So we have fire access, we have water access too. You can go either way. We don't have great map move. Like, these goblins are not like amazing on their feet. They're okay. You can do map move too in friendly plains and through friendly mountains, so it's not bad. We don't have snow survival. So on one hand, I think... I can't remember... 14 might be right at the threshold. I can't remember. For snow move, map move 2... If it's all good terrain, I can't remember. Oh, you have forest too. So check that out. One of the main problems you have is fire elementals, though. Like, fire elementals will mess your day up. It messes Vedheim's day up. Like, Vedheim attacking into a heat nation with fire elementals, it is a bad freaking thing, right? So, in general, I would say don't attack somebody unless you're going to kill, like, that can make fire elementals, unless you're doing it before they have them or after it's relevant. Like, the other thing is, like, once, like, Army of Golden stuff comes out, or, like, a lot of the fire resistance buffs, you'll do a lot better. Before that, no please. But if you're worried about them attacking into you, taking cold is a real option, right? It's going to make it so you can cross rivers, potentially going to mess with your map move, is going to open up your armies in the late game to getting completely murdered by Murdering Winter. However, you can kind of, if you want to, you can get out of the goblin game by the late game, because the goblins are going to get murdered by Flames from the Sky and a bunch of other things. These guys, the Dai Bakemono, are not going to give a shit about Flames from the Sky. Your Uba, they don't care about Flames from the Sky. Neither do your Bakemono sorcerers, because this guy will switch forms. You know, you can lose items that are on them from it, but you won't lose the mage. So, I would consider Cold 3, depending on how many Fire Nations and who's playing them. You could also go Heat 3, but again, you can kind of get wrecked by Fire Elementals. If you're running into Fire Elementals, right? If that's the thing that's happening, because that's one of the mid-game like traps you can worry into. The other thing, or worry about, the other thing is like Morvark Knights. Anything with like a big area of effect attack, like Morvark Knights have like an area of effect fire thing. Consider like going towards these dudes, right? Because like all the area effect stuff is going to mulch your Bakemono. These guys are probably going to do better. I mean, I wouldn't want to really send these guys into Morvarks, but if you get like Earthmeld or Tangle Vines or something on a Morvark, you can probably pop them in the face with a Dai Bakemono and kill them pretty fast. So, but that requires you kind of outplaying Yis. Nobody wants Yis running at them in the early game, though. But just something to consider. I think it's also an argument for having not an army fully dedicated to goblins or fully dedicated to Dai Bakemono, but like having a mix. Because if you're if you're all in on goblins, or even if you have individual armies of goblins or Dai Bakemono, like if the enemy doesn't know which one they're going to get, you know, because all the area of effect things are going to be significantly worse against the Dai Bakemono. But if you're all in on goblins, there's a lot of area of effect things that can really mess your day up. Anything that tramples, like Earth Elementals are going to mess their day up. Fire Elementals are going to mess their day up. Air Elementals are going to mess their day up. Elephants, bunch of things. That being said, with all the buffs on them, they are pretty scary little monsters. The other thing for fighting things like Fire Elementals and things like that, our archers are actually really good against Fire Elementals and Air Elementals because they have 0 protection. So, you know, you kind of count on a lot of short bows not doing any damage, but versus, you know, just anyway, because they're going to hit protection or like a shield or whatever. Versus Air Elementals and Fire Elementals actually do pretty well. With flaming arrows, they absolutely mulch Air Elementals. And that's something that can come out reasonably early. Like you can beat a nation that's rushing to Air Elementals. You can beat them to having flaming arrows. And then these guys will mulch Air Elementals. Not mulch. They'll do pretty good. And then they'll actually, whether you have flaming arrows isn't going to help versus Fire Elementals, but short bows in general are just okay against Fire Elementals. So those are just some ideas there for how to deal with like some of the things that are going to potentially hurt you if you're just like leaning really heavily into these goblins. And the goblins are good. Yeah, so I would say like for your first, like don't pick, like trying to pick, I think like early game your strength are like point buffing a lot of the goblins, and then maybe having you know, like I was showing you some of the point buffing things you can do, like spamming Moss Body and stuff. You can do that, and like Skelly spam, you can put Skelly spammers behind a line of like 10 or 20 of these guys, right? And you hit all these guys with like quickness and Moss Body, or Iron Warriors, or whatever it is you're doing, like one cast of Marble Warriors on them, right? And then a bunch of Moss Body. And these are like your front line that are going to be mulching things that actually close with them in melee. And then you got Skelly spammers behind them. Like that is a really good strategy. But yeah, so in the early game, you're going to be leaning on the Bakemono, maybe mixed in with some other stuff. Um, don't try to go for somebody that doesn't have really good area of effect stuff early, right? That would be my advice, right? Avoid the area of effect things. Avoid guys with like easy fire access, or easy fire elemental access. A few air elementals isn't going to hurt you, but people who can drop like 20 or 30 air elementals on you because you're trying to kill them, maybe don't go after them right away unless you have like a big, huge pile of Bakemono archers who are ready to do flaming arrows, and then you might say, come and get it. But yeah, if you're getting attacked by a fire elemental spamming nation, I would just gym bait them, and then when it's time to actually fight them, use short bows on the fire elementals. That's kind of what I would do there. The plans for the late game, I think, are like break into Astral. Will of Fates makes such a big difference on your goblins. That's one of the things you must break into. In this case, like with this particular build, we have a monolith. We can get golems. We can get some of the Astral boosters. We only have one slot on this, so we might have to like empower this guy because, you know, he could put a crystal coin on B5. That's not even enough to do a ring of sorcery. So we can kind of break into Astral with this, but you kind of also want like maybe one more path. You could also potentially take a rainbow, maybe have a little bit less scales or something like that. But, you know, more slots to like climb Astral better. But I mean, honestly, being able to summon a golem is fine. Like, you're not going to be like an Astral powerhouse, but this will break you into Astral enough that you can site search Astral, you can get a golem, and the golem can follow your armies around. And that's kind of like the bare minimum. You can also do matrices with something like this. That's something to think about, how you're going to get into Astral. The other thing is, how are you going to get into air? This particular build isn't going to really help you with that, except like Fairy Queens, which you don't really have high nature access on this nation. So this is something that would help a bit. It gives you the option to get Fairy Queens in the late game. Air is really important. In general, when you have a nation that really wants numbers advantage, if you have that numbers advantage, like a bajillion Bakemono, what you don't want to have is you don't want that, you know, hundreds of Bakemono to die while they're marching across the map. So using that numbers advantage with mass flight can be huge. Definitely would be something I would look at. It's not something easy for you to do. We do have some Tengu and stuff we can get. These aren't going to be terribly easy. There's a whole boatload of summons. It is worth noting you can get the Dione, and the Dione can break you into air. There may be other ways to break into air with this nation other than the Dione. And this also is like, it's high in Conjuration. It's like Conjuration 8, I want to say, maybe 7. And there might be some other... Okay, I'm going to pause. We'll look at it real quick. All right, so here are the ways to break into air. We basically have the... where did the Dione go? Dione, okay. There might be some other... Yeah, some of these other guys get like a single air random or something, like the Kitsune can do it. Conjuration 6, you can do this with just the Nature 2. This can get you access to it. You know, you can potentially, you have a pretty decent shot at rolling an air 2. It's not a great shot, but, you know, if you want to spin the 30 Nature Gem lottery, a lot of times you could do it. A Dione, you've got a decent chance to get an air 1. The thing is, I feel like, I mean, you can empower these guys up to be an air 2 too. And then you can do off specs with them. And then, but with these guys, you can cloud trapeze around and do magic phase super combatant attacks, which is really cool. And these guys, you know, if you get an air random, you can do Wind of Death. You know, controlling Well of Misery is a reasonable target to try to get these Dione out. This is definitely a summon to consider. The big air access, though, is from this dude. Now, how do you cast it, though? You don't really get air-earth access. It's possible you get it on the Kitsune, but I don't think you're going to get it from any of the other things except the Dione, right? So, you know, you can have high nature, get a Fairy Queen, get good air access. That's probably the most straightforward way. Like back-asswards way is summon a Dione, empower him in air, summon Tengu. That's another way to do it. It's kind of like the Yomi way to do it. There's probably some other way I didn't think of, but these, I think for me, like the main points of summons is to like break you into other magic paths for this nation. There's probably like we could probably look at these things. They're probably cool, you know. Like we could go through and look at all of them. I'm sure there's decent uses for some of these. Like I think there's some assassins and other this, that's, and the other. The Onishugo also pretty cool. You get these pretty like way earlier at 6, so they're one less death path than the Dione, and you're not going to be able to get the random to do Daitengu because the Dione are going to come with Earth. So when you roll air, you'll also have Earth, which is what you need to summon the Daitengu. So, yeah. But Oni Generals are pretty nice. I would probably do Dione instead. Yeah. So that's probably it for that. The other thing that I think, so this is like one way to take it. Another way to take it is just this thing and do something really stupid on a Phoenix Spire dude, like Blood Vengeance. The nice thing about this is you do kind of need blood access to get, like, to do your thugging well. You can buy, you don't need a lot of blood. Like, we're not summoning demons. That's not really the goal. I mean, with this, you would have a fair amount. You'd be able to, like, summon demons. You'd have enough blood slaves. You could empower, like, one of your Bakemono sorcerers, like a death random in blood. He could summon vampires. This breaks you into blood, right? And this guy's just going to blood hunt your capital. You patrol down the unrest. You suck it. And then you have hilarious blood vengeance on your Phoenix-pired Bakemono sorcerers. By the way, you know what counters blood vengeance and Phoenix Pyre? Charm and like enslaved mind. So, but this is extra hilarious when mages are trying to kill, or like a great sort of sharpness dude's trying to kill your Bakemono dude. It's like you light them up with blood vengeance. So, like a holy scourge dude. This is a funny thing you can do, and you can have really good scales with it, like even better than we had. So, yeah, this is a kind of funny thing that I think is a reasonable way to do it. Basically, any scales build, I think, is going to make some sense. There's also pretty cool pretenders. Like you have this guy who's like Dominion, or no, he's immortal, right? These are paths you don't necessarily need too much, but there's a bunch of things you could do. You could even go a rainbow. I would say if you're going to do a rainbow, do it for the magic paths on your pretender, right? And then once you figure out the magic paths you want on your pretender, then you could kind of pick up other things as auxiliary. But since the only thing you're really getting it for is Bakemono, I would say don't. Like, if you're going to go, like, the more you put in the bless for the Bakemono sorcerer, put it in for the human unit, or, like, for the living unit. Like, don't put it in for the undead one. Because the undead one's important, but, I don't know. I feel like you'll have more human ones. So, like, unaging, and then keep it small. Your scales nation. And the early game stuff is going to impact you a lot. Like the Bakemono stuff comes out way later. Like having a lot of money in the beginning of the game so that you can make Bakemono out of every single like nook and cranny, I think is going to go a lot farther to setting you up for like having a reasonably easy first war, getting your research going, and then going into the mid game with a lot of power. I think that's it, guys. I think we've covered the nation. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. How do you win? Let's do closing thoughts on that. I think, either you have like really good timings and you just play like totally momentum, which this nation can do. Another way to win, if you haven't really fixed your late game things, but it's starting to go into late game, like you don't have good astral or blood, or high nature, or air, then you're going to, which I think is like, it's going to be hard to have those things as good as other nations. It's going to be hard to doom stack. Like, I feel like this is a nation that's going to have trouble in the deep, deep, deep late game, doom stacking as well as other nations, because other nations are going to have better magic. However, better magic diversity. However, you can have a ton of armies, and everything's disposable. You're not dependent on anything from your cap. You just, like, everything is disposable in scales. So you can just put a ton of rating pressure out. You can have a ton of reasonably medium commitment armies and even high commitment armies. You can have a fair number of high commitment armies. Just be cautious that your highest commitment army may get bulldozed by somebody who has literally all the magic. Right? They have all the magic diversity, and that may not be something you have yet. It's okay. If you're in that situation, though, the most important thing is knowing when not to take a fight, right? When that doom stack is coming, that's going to kill your army. It's better to just keep your army alive, move it somewhere where that doom stack's not going to be. While that player that has that doom stack that can kill your army, he probably doesn't have as many stacks, because that's the thing you've got in spades. You've got scales, you got money. You can spam out all the units you need, all the mages you need. Yeah, that's how I think about it. Anyway, guys, I hope you've enjoyed it. As a really long national overview, but it's kind of a lot to cover. There's a lot of like weird little niche things to do. I think I've covered a lot of the things. I'm sure I haven't covered all the things. But yeah, thanks for watching. See you later.